Hello, everyone. This is Tyler here. Many people may have known me. I had a previous YouTube channel, Viking Traveler, and I'm going to use this channel to kind of continue on with the content I had from that previous channel, which some of it was quite controversial, and most likely I'll move some of the videos over. But what I'm going to do is just cut to the chase here and discuss kind of after being back in the US more or less for about 6 months now, it's been for me like kind of my outlook on affairs here and kind of what the challenges and what the overall climate is like for younger guys here. I entered the workforce once again in around February, and I've been working really long weeks, often 60 plus hour weeks. And I've been basically financially reestablishing myself. Eventually, I would like to go back into full-time day trading, algo trading, and even start maybe a venture related to that. I had previously attempted to, and I was initially successful, but unfortunately that didn't work out. Cutting to the chase here, which is the whole like work climate here and problems that I've seen and experienced, and just the inconsistencies, we'll say, in the like the work culture here. One of the first things I will acknowledge is that you can have honest dialogue with certain individuals on a personal basis, but other things that people don't really like discussing. But I will say, compared to say where I lived prior to Estonia, there are more people willing to have honest dialogue in discourse on issues. Also, something I see in the US that's more akin to, say, a country like Russia or China is that people are more often realistic about the real tendencies of our federal government and their real intentions on the masses, and how and most at least semi-intelligent people don't see the government as being for their benefit at this point. Especially younger guys are seeing it more clear as day. And so something I noticed, for example, currently in the retail industry, we'll say, and it's very interesting when I look at kind of the double standards, for example, with regards to how the standards for men compared to what's the standard for women. It's very different. I see women or gals in the said workplace that can basically be in drug-induced states. They have bad attitudes. They can put in very little effort, and they're late often, and they still hold their jobs. On the contrary, the standards for guys, like especially younger guys, is much higher. There's such a difference in what's considered normal. And I'll just say this is what has and will continue to destroy America. This is what started destroying the US, really, say, in the 1960s and 70s. This was the beginning of like woke culture. And this is why we have, say, single mommy crisis in America. There's such a warped understanding of what's considered normal for guys compared to gals. It's just like a clown world. Often when I see it at one of my workplaces, one of my managers, she is a woman, and she's a nice person. She overall is a very respectable person. She treats me very fairly, respects me. So I'm not going to say they're all like this, but I will say, especially the younger you go, the worse it seems to get. And I don't see this improving. The problem also here is due to the fact that guys don't have self-respect anymore. They don't hold everyone to the same standards, rather than, oh, I'll hold this guy to this standard, I'll hold this gal to this standard, rather than just be all. And I see this also. This is a problem with Gen Z, the fact that the vast majority of them have been brought up, even if they grew up with two-parent households, it's very feminine. The environment that they've grown up in, even guys that are in their late teens, they basically, they're in a situation where it takes 2 or 3 years. They have to be rewired, basically, their brains, because the high school environment is very feminine, and then they're brought up where the mom basically is the real sayer in most of the decisions, which this is kind of different. I think the last generation that kind of maybe experienced either more egalitarianism or the opposite was the millennials, because a lot of millennials were either brought up by baby boomers or they were brought up by Gen Xers. And generally, the ones brought up by baby boomers, especially the guys, were it was I believe a much more rigid kind of situation, especially people that came from more strict families, and it wasn't this like super feminine upbringing that I now see. I myself, I went through private schools for most of my life. My first 2 years of high school, I went to a Catholic all guys prep school. It was in Chicago. It was a very, very difficult school, and it was very strict. But I will say this, it was completely the opposite. I went to a public high school for 1 year. I was a junior in high school. The all guy Catholic high school was masculine as you could be. It was as masculine as what you would have used to have seen in like the U.S. Marine Corps. Whereas when I went over to the public high school in different state, it was very feminine. It was totally the opposite. I felt like I was basically in a big daycare for kids, for older kids. It was just an awful experience. And I'm glad I experienced that, because I realized I don't want to pay taxes into that kind of system. I don't want to pay property taxes that funds that kind of crap system. That was the biggest point that I realized. And this is why this kind of goes off topic. This is why I plan on putting most of my investment in real estate and land in foreign markets. I won't pay property taxes into such a crap system, to be frank about it. And so that was a very good learning experience for me. There were things I learned also, like I wish I would have dropped out of high school, pursued my got in my GED, and then just started college, or started focusing on language learning, Spanish, Russian, German, especially Spanish and German. I'm fluent in Spanish, and just really hammered at language, maybe even at that point moved abroad when I was 18 and just started studying at a foreign university and trying to get a job abroad. That's probably what I would have done if I were to go back in time. But that was very useful for me in terms of where I currently am at. And the other thing too is it's hard for someone to be red pilled, especially a younger person. Like say the Gen Z example, if you haven't really seen a different perspective, if you haven't lived in a foreign country, experienced something quite different, been in different workplaces, work environments as I have. So I understand for those younger guys that I work with, that could be a big issue there, but it's very useful. The next thing here, it's quite blatant to me, is that here in the US, it's very difficult if you're not either on the high end of like income and wealth, or it's like the middle class is being totally whittled away. I can't tell you, I know barely any younger people here that own an apartment, own a house, even people well into their 20s. And this is a huge issue. I know countless people that can't even afford to rent their own apartment or even rent with a roommate. That just tells you how bad the economics are getting for your average younger person. I see this very frequently here in West Florida, and quite honestly, I don't see this improving. Now, I understand people will say that yes, in other markets, you say like in Germany or in Sweden, that for those people comparatively, it is also expensive to rent or to buy. But I would also mention there, though, at least they can still afford to do it. And the other thing too is that big problem here is because of both job stability, underemployment. So yeah, I know countless people where 1 week they may make only $300, the next week they may make $500. There's very little stability within the job sector, which then influences how someone has to approach their living situation. And this is also why I effectively say that a lot of the guys now are basically priced out of the dating market of the US. Not saying I wouldn't encourage a guy to even get into the dating or and certainly not into the marriage market of America. It's a really treacherous system. And this also actually brings up another point here that I kind of learned from having come back here, that the sim culture of the US of guys is just unbelievable. It is unreal for me to see. And this is, I know a lot of guys hate hearing this word, but it is the truth here. The simping is just it. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of this started generations ago. I lived in Eastern Europe and I lived in South America. And yeah, there's some like simping, but like what I see here is like I see literally prostitutes or like gals that can like, I mean, they're not even attractive gals that guys like dump like money on them. They pay for like their living arrangements. They pay for this and that. And then I see another guy who offers real value. Like, I mean, they have brilliant business concepts or potential to become a business partner, and no one does anything for them. No one gives them a dime. And this was unfortunate. This was my situation. This is unfortunate why I had to go back to the US, and I basically had to take jobs that were not great either, because no one would self-fund the things I wanted to do. And this is also why I don't I don't owe the US anything. I mean, everything that I've achieved has been it's been through my like my parents, my family. I like I've mentioned before, I didn't go to public high schools for many years. I went through private schools. I couldn't, the public schools were crap. That's why I think it's ridiculous. There's this mindset. It's not as much nowadays, but there's this mindset that as if you're born in the US that you owe this country something. Like it's so stupid, honestly. Like would people say that if someone was from Brazil, if you're from China? I mean, would people say that same thing? I mean, it's stupid, honestly. You don't owe anything to that country. Like I said, the simp culture is also carried into the workplace, and why I said there's this really weird like one standard for one gender and then a different standard for the other gender. And ultimately, this is why, I mean, the US is, I mean, it's going to be destroyed in 20 years, this country. This is why I would tell people, one of many reasons I wouldn't invest in real estate here. I think it's going to become a even more violent version of, say, Brazil. Demographically, we can see this. And I just see this continuing because of the foundation is just really piss poor, to be frank about it. It's when we look at other places, I know Russia's been criticized quite frequently. I have good and bad opinions about Russia, but what I will say with Russia is that place is going to last for 50, 100 years as it looks now. That place, I mean, has a very strong, rigid foundation. If on a personal level, there's a lot of scumbaggery. I know because I've lived there. My brother lives there. But I will say when it comes to that foundation, it is a strong, firm foundation. And that's why Russia has a real future. US doesn't. It doesn't have a firm foundation. And that as I tell people, if I were to, how I would like the US to be or would have envisioned it, it would look like a different country at this point. But this is just not the mostly Anglo influence many decades ago has influenced what we have now. And one of those things is that simping culture that I point to that has also caused many other issues. And so that's where we're at now with that.